That's red osier dogwood down there. Which,
Dogwood?
yeah, which we planted.
It doesn't get real
And it's a native.
tall. This is about as tall as it usually gets in the wild, right there.
Okay, well, I've seen red trees too.
And they call it red osier. The red refers to the red stems that you see. But it's a very important riparian species.
Right.
It's also a ice cream plant as far as cattle are concerned. They love to eat it.
And deer.
And here. Is this the area where it becomes a storm drain?
No, it's a ways down yet. So it is still surface water at this point.
And it's in these people's backyards.
And most of the yards are just, well, I was hoping to see a place where we might could see through. They're just grass going right down to the creek. They've left a few big trees up, but I'm not aware of anybody who's really left native vegetation along it down there. These people right here very nicely let Washington Middle School come and do their annual Pattee Creek monitoring in their backyard. And
That's pretty.
So let me explain what you're looking at here. Yeah, this is a interesting spot too. Okay, in 2001, the city and WMG Engineering here in Missoula began work on putting together the whole blueprint for how the sewage or the storm sewer project was going to commence. This is the storm sewer project that basically takes all of Pattee Creek's water as well as the flow from South Hills, from Linda Vista, or not Linda Vista, but it's just Lincoln Hills, Farview's right here, and then Lincoln Hills is Rattlesnake. Farview's here, and also parts of South Hills, and puts it all into a 54-inch underground culvert that eventually flows into the Bitterroot.
so the runoff of all this pavement gets captured and into doesn't come to.
Right.
So they have done a lot to reduce flooding right there.
Well, we're not going to go to today, but the big, what they call Cattail Corner, it's the big wetland complex by Albertsons, gets the flow from the, there's like a little stream that comes down right on where High Park is, where it hits Southwest Higgins right there. So that's the flow for that, but the rest of the flow winds up in the storm sewer system that all goes to the Bitterroot River. And a lot of the origins for this came back from late 70s or so, when the last significant flood of Pattee Creek was when the year Mount St. Helens blew was 1980, and there was a ton of runoff that year from Pattee Creek, and that was the year that the city came along and dumped big piles of sand all the way down Pattee Creek Drive so that people could build sandbags and sandbag their yards and things like that. And because of that flooding problem, in which evidently some homes further down the creek got actually some damage and things of that nature, the city embarked on this idea that, well, we were going to control Pattee Creek's flow and be able to take care of the storm problem. So 20 years later, 2000, this finally got rolling along, and what you see here is the beginning of that. I and Lad Notek, who's a Fish and Wildlife Parks biologist for the area, and the engineer all came out here and looked at this when it was still just, a creek. And he explained how all this was going to look. And this actually looked pretty neat on blueprint, but as somebody that's done stream restoration work, I can tell you that this is really nasty looking. You don't create like rock weirs and waterfalls by doing things like that. You try to emulate what nature would do, and you don't have these weird looking, I mean, it's effective, I guess, but
effective for certain things.
You'd have a hard time going out in nature and finding anything that looks like that.
Are these little red osier dogwoods that were planted, do you think?
Yeah, these were. And you might notice that this is typical of deer browse, where all the ends are kind of clipped off like this. Deer really like this plant.
It looks like they seeded too, because this would be. Yeah. Yeah. I just want to introduce Kent Watson here. He's the local landscape architect. He's also, I think, been involved in some of the Pattee Creek planning, and also felt kind of surprised when he heard that here he was.
And I remember you, Kent.
Yeah, involved in this planning process. And then boom,
yeah.
It seemed to a lot of us just out of nowhere came this sweet proposal. But their view was, oh, well, we've been planning to do this since 1980 or 81.
So
what do you mean you?
To get back to the day that Ladd and I and Brent from WGM all met out here, before this basin was ever built, the idea of this basin was that it was going to trap sediment and rock that comes down from Pattee Creek so that it doesn't all wind up in the storm sewer system and plug things up or create problems in the system. So that's the purpose of this pond. Knowing that there was going to be a pond here, Ladd and I met with Brent and we came up with this great idea that this was going to be a kids fishing pond, and we came up with a design where the whole thing was going to get dug out in such a way that there was some good fishing spots and so forth. And evidently the university got wind of that and went totally ballistic over the idea that kids would come down here and there would be major liability problems and so forth. So our whole plan got shelved and replaced by what I think of as like a Stalag 17 approach to this whole thing, where they created more or less like an institutional eyesore along here and then fenced it all in and
didn't even do habitat. I mean, you'd think if they weren't going to allow humans, they would at least have wildlife habitat.
My next target is to organize neighborhood people to attack this thing and see if we can get the university to get a little less paranoid and maybe look at making this thing more of a community amenity instead of what it is right now.
Just attack them for the weed spread. Look at, I mean, there's no noxious weeds there, but they certainly have annual weeds that are out of control.
From a number of management perspectives, this is just way out of line. It's totally nasty. But
it was really the university that squelched the whole idea.
Right.
You know, we'd all talked about it.
Yeah, right.
One of the meetings down at the farming, and Don and I thinking about ways to do it.
And the university's main concern was these apartments right here. There'd be kids that lives in these apartments that would want to come down here, and that this would be a huge liability for them.
No one wants to come. Instead, they'll have to climb the fence.
Well, one of the biggest concerns was that when it was iced over in the wintertime, the kids would want to sled off these little slopes around it and onto the ice, and that would be like a major safety issue. And there's probably ways to work that out better than to do what they did. But at any rate, that's the purpose of the pond, is to catch sediment and rock. And the way this was all explained to me by Steve King, the city engineer, was that this whole system was designed to allow for all of Pattee Creek's flow to go into the storm sewer system, and that they could basically just shut off the flow, surface flow to Pattee Creek at their whim if they needed to manage things, and that all the flow at this corner, at this intersection right here, would enter the storm sewer system. When we did our project, we found out that that's not the case at all, that they actually did not know how to turn it off. And
Dave Clayman told me. It was kind of absurd.
It created a real problem, because all of the city engineers that thought they had this all figured out were suddenly all confused as to what they were going to do. And we ended up actually constructing a dam with a bunch of yellow flag houses to try to cut off Pattee Creek's flow. But within like an hour of us building our dam, somebody from the sewage department showed up and put in an inflatable patch onto the intake of Pattee Creek right over in that corner, which shut off the flow to the creek. So it was like our dam within an hour was rendered just a stupid waste of resources. But it was just interesting to where even that little simple thing was like a major technological issue when it came time to doing it, which makes me kind of wonder about this whole system, since you know, the same people that designed this thing here were responsible for the whole system, but I won't get into that right now. The main thing is that the way this is all designed, it basically takes, there's in that corner right there is overflow device, so that if the flow from Pattee Creek reaches a certain level, that all the overflow gets dumped into the storm sewer system and then flows downstream. There's a little bit of flow that goes into the creek channel itself, which is what we worked on. And if there's a tremendous amount of flow, then there's other things pulled into the system that allow them to do things like utilize the playfield south of Sentinel High School so that they can create large, shallow, kind of temporary holding basins if there's that much flood water to deal with.
Yeah, we can swing by there and look out at that as we go by. We better head on to the
Okay.
other.
So what happens to the fish at this point?
That's the real problem with my project as far as fish.
Always goes into the pond and out again, or is the pond only used when turbid flow is coming down in the spring?
Well, if it were possible to just walk over there, I could show you, or you can see it from here.
There is the bypass right there. I don't know.
The way this was all explained to me back in 2001 was that this pond would have a really nifty fish screens that no fish from Pattee Creek got down into the storm sewer system. And if you look right there at that box, you see the screening system. It's those big bars that are about 6 inches apart. So the likelihood of fish being screened out by that is pretty slim. You'd have to be a really intrepid fish to hold on to those bars and keep from getting sucked into the storm sewer system. And beyond that, there's another overflow that feeds the Pattee Creek channel. So I'm not really sure how fish will get through all this. And if you ask the city engineering people, I don't think they have much of an idea either. So
There's no connection of this from here on down that fish can use to the Clark Ford.
fish could get from here to Bancroft Ponds, but
Not back up.
exactly how they can do that remains to be seen. And they definitely could not get back up. They'd have a really hard time because they'd have to go through.
So anything that came down is now trapped in the lower reaches. They can't go back up again.
Right.
Kind of become an adfluvial, a lake with a stream.
Well, yeah.
I'm just kidding, John.
Rift basin
Lake.
subspecies.
Right.
So why is the screen over there though? Like, I don't,
That's where it goes into the storm sewer.
okay.
They need to screen the debris.
Yeah, keep the big logs and stuff out of there. Tree branches and stuff like that.
So that's one of the next challenges
so
is
does
how
the
to.
water just go straight to the creek
Sewer terms.
that goes on down?
Well, if we could peek over there at that little box, what you'd see is that there's another little drainage opening that allows some of the water to actually go into the channel. But
So it all goes in here first, and then
Right,
most
right.
of it goes down the storm sewer, and some of it still
Right.
goes down the. So there might
exactly.
be a fish that wouldn't
It's
get sucked down.
it's possible the rare fish could make its way over there.
So right now, the storm sewer piece is just there during major hydrological events.
Right, right.
Otherwise, it's going into the pipe and into the
Okay,
channel.
you can just see that second trash rack around the corner is the intake for the channel itself.
Okay.
And again,
Ah.
that screen's not going to do a very good job of
No, it's
keeping fish from getting sucked out.
I'll keep the tarpon up.
waterfront property
What
yet.
is all that stuff on the side of the creek?
Yellow flag iris.
There's some cats.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Jim Hubeck waiting for us.
Okay. Oh, that's beautiful. That would be a river birch.
Oh.
So, Tom and Sarah here were actually involved in this project, but this is the first phase of it. Was there's two city parks. This is Lester Park, and there's another park a little ways further down. What you can immediately see here is that Pattee Creek flows through people's front yards. So this is about as urban as you can get, I guess, unless this was happening to be in the middle of a downtown area. So it's kind of a sensitive thing. You don't start mucking around with a creek in the middle of people's yards without being very cognizant of what it's the kind of impacts you're going to have and so forth. What we tried to do with Pattee Creek was basically complement what was already here and already starting to happen. When we were out here last April with our design engineer, what he saw happen here was Pattee Creek was forming what's called a Rosgan E channel, which is basically just when you have fairly flat land, it's what streams do when they start to snake back and forth. And even then we could see, before we done anything, that Pattee Creek was already starting to create a little bit of continuosity. In this stretch, particularly because of these willows here, we weren't able to do a lot of digging, and instead what we did was just put it in drop structures up here. So things like this one right here, this log structure actually took, there was quite a bit of excavation to put this in. It went, I don't know, several feet that way and several feet over here, and then it was built up over, I mean, layers of logs and rocks, and what you see here is just sort of the surface part of that. There's quite a bit of it that's all underground here, but the idea is that that's all locked in, and that this structure here will be here for many, many years to come. It'll help complement what the stream wants to do on its own. Did I do all right with that, Tom?
Get to help aerate the water. Is that sound good?
The idea is to actually create little pools on the downstream side of those by creating a V-shaped structure that's angled upstream. It concentrates the flow into the center of the stream. So whenever you do get any increased flow, it'll help scour out a little pool. The other thing to make that work is that if you look real closely, the structures are actually sloped a little bit downward going upstream. So the lower end of the log here is about half a foot or maybe a third of a foot higher than it is in the middle of the stream. And that also helps with correcting flow. And if you look at the rock structure, it's constructed in a similar manner.
And well, it's not going to be a whole lot bigger than it is right now, but from a biological perspective, if there are indeed trout down here, this is going to be a very important holding place for them to hang out. That's going to be kind of sheltered as opposed to the open straightaway that you see further downstream. And here you can see, I'm almost stepping on one. These are the plants that we put in. Expensive little plants, I might add, that are revegetation consultant spent 2 or 3 years hand growing these things in his yard and various other places. But these will grow up eventually, and will. This is red osier dogwood here, and there's another one right there. There's another next to Tom there. These will grow up and help to form a matrix for being able to shade this channel land, which is also very important from a habitat perspective. This is a river birch right here.
Mow it or something.
The mowing will continue, but it's going to stop right about there.
How do you make sure that happens?
Because we've coordinated this with the City Parks and Recreation Department. Basically, everything from here on over is hands off now for them.
When was this done? When was this work done?
The work was just done, I don't know, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago, yeah.
It'll be 3 weeks on Tuesday is when we began.
They're supposed to stop mowing at the big trees.
Right.
Get to the line of big trees, stop mowing.
Is there going to be costs in the community of not having people mow right up to it? Like property owners?
Well, part of the challenge of this is, now that we've done our little demonstration thing in this park and the next one down, can we continue the same restoration approach throughout what remains of Pattee Creek above ground, which would be from here down to Bancroft and upstream to the intersection? And area homeowner that I've talked to has said, yeah, let's do it. In fact, we had several that came out while we were doing this project and were saying, you know, how much money do you want? You know, make it happen right now. And, you know, this took, I don't know, it took 4 years to get this to actually happen on my part. And
how high will this water be allowed to go before it defaults into the sewer line?
Well, if the engineering works right, this is about as much water as will ever be in Pattee Creek, because every bit of water that is up to a certain level is going to overflow up there in the grit chamber into the sewer system. So what is here is basically just a remnant of that flow. And during storm events, the only reason that this is going to ever increase is if they actually just let it go on through the system instead of backing up there more. And if they do let it go through the system, again, this whole thing is designed from a storm management perspective by letting the water go across Bancroft and into the playing field south of Sentinel High School. And we'll see the berms and stuff that have been built up over there to make all that happen.
And that's sort of the last worst case situation.
That's like a 1,000-year flood event kind of thing.
That's important to keep in mind, because, let me just interject very briefly here. I'm involved with a colleague of mine to try to make those berms that they put in Playfair Park look prettier. Instead of coming to us in the design process and helping them design something that might have been more attractive at the beginning, they spent the money, built the berms, isolated the concession stand behind this huge berm where you can hardly see it. Now we're asked to come in with a minimal budget and try to make it look pretty. And my point being, had they involved professionals like myself or colleagues of mine in the whole design process, that might have been avoided. Same way with that siltation pond. Had one of us been involved with the engineers early on, it could have changed the whole outlook of what happened there. So it's important to understand this process. And I think with John, I was amazed that John was able to pull this together and pull it off. I mean, this is great.
Yeah, well, I'm stubborn that way.
I wanted to introduce a couple other people who introduced Kent Watson earlier. I wanted to just mention Ron Scholl here from MCAT, who's filming some of the field trip, and retired botany professor Jim Hoppeck over there, who studied the plant ecology of western Montana and particularly Pattee Canyon for many, many years, and has been providing us with a lot of really neat and interesting historic aerial photos and maps of this area.
And I live 2 blocks from here, so I've been watching this since 1960.
That's great.
He's seen a lot of change. Well, have you seen very much change? Because, I mean, it was already in this ditch here by the time.
The changes I've witnessed are almost too obscure for even you to understand. I live down at the other end, two blocks from here. I used to be able to see in 1964 the entire hillside of Farviews. And now the trees and the homes and the asphalt and the concrete have completely overtaken this. And I think John's sequence of air photos that we at the poster session shows the filling in.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess your opening remarks this morning were, where the hell is all this water coming from that required a storm sewer system that I'm paying for, people?
Mm-hmm.
This is a special district. And it turns out that there isn't a drop of water that falls that can actually go vertical. That has to go horizontal. And so, and there are some strange pipes. If you, Denison's Pond that you notice up there has a big concrete pipe coming in from underneath the street. Where the hell is the other end? The other day it was a mud sludge coming into the water. And I did send pictures of that to these people. So how often is there going to be spikes of mud coming into here? And will one spike ruin the whole damn thing?
Was that supposed to be the purpose of that basin? Or that the basin is so small and turns over so fast it can only settle out sand, right?
Well, I'm not really sure what material they hope to pull out of there. That's a really good example of just how rural this was just not too long ago, and it's only, in the last few decades that you see the kind of development and kind of urban sprawl that's brought all this on.
When did you say that it got a lot more urban?
The real change occurred in the 1940s. If you look at the 1950s aerial photos, you start to see the whole grid of streets in this area and the major housing development. This is a picture that Jim supplied of 1937. And even there's a few houses up here on South. Down here, there's nothing. It's all just open area.
Wow.
That's the grit chamber that we were just at the site of the grit chamber.
Wow.
Apparently when some of these houses were being
And maybe
built,
for you.
there was supposed to be
It
a
involves
road
some other things
that
too.
crossed the creek here.
The
and
Milltown.
who own these houses just
People
There's
really
no
decided
way
to
to
see these up
ask,
close.
you
These
know,
are
for
some
forgiveness
pretty amazing
rather than
pictures of
permission,
houses.
and they planted the trees there
Oh, really?
before they could put the road in.
Interesting.
And
Well, good for them.
pretty big trees and
Oh, yeah.
they didn't put the bridge
So
in.
we
There was
are,
supposed to be
we
where
came
that
out here
footbridge
and
you know,
the-
it was, that road
this
was
is
supposed
Pattee
to
Creek
come
Drive.
through there.
Would be right about here.
Well, to wrap up this spot,
We're sort of
if you
along
look
here.
at along this whole stretch, you'll see there's several, I don't know how many we have, 5, Tom, or 6
Yeah, so we're right
structures. So, and you'll also see plantings. We did less planting overall up here, mainly because this is a very heavily shaded area in the summertime, and a lot of the stuff just won't grow up here. Oh, I just wanted to show this one little spot here. This is the only part of Pattee Creek and Lester Park that gets any sun to speak of, because once you get past this alder, it's all shade. Yellow flag iris really loves sunshine. It doesn't do well in shaded environments. So basically this entire stretch was just choked with yellow flag iris, and we had to have our excavator come in here and dig all of it out. And we replanted it with all these willow stakes that you see, and there's also other willows that are kind of buried, but sandbar willow. Mm-hmm.
God, that didn't look like it to me, huh?
So the idea is that this will all come up in willow growth eventually.
Oh, lovely.
We'll see how.
In the front yards, because there's a ton. So
Well, supposedly they're all going to get killed and removed. The county weed district has got a grandiose plan to kill every yellow flag iris from the base of the canyon all the way to Bancroft Ponds, because now that the storm sewer system allows for the yellow flag to actually get to the Bitterroot River, it's a noxious weed now, and the county doesn't want to be stuck with the responsibility of putting yellow flag into the Bitterroot River. So they got this grandiose plan now to take it all out. What we found is that the only practical way to get rid of it is just to dig it all out in mass, in which case you end up with like tons of material you have to haul away. We got it all taken care of by eco-compost, luckily, but I don't know what the kind of... Yeah, there's a little bit left, and
A little bit of iris?
Yeah.
part of my monitoring these two projects is to come in over the course of the spring and summer and try to tear stuff like that out, which will not be fun, but you can't get rid of it. The stuff that we did is really a temporary thing. You can just look upstream and see a lot more yellow flag right there, and this stuff spreads like wildfire. It spreads like crazy, so it'll definitely recolonize these sites and so forth, and it'll be an ongoing problem.
Vegetation requires less maintenance than other stuff. That's not necessarily true if you're talking about a real invasive exotic horticultural species. If you don't want that in there, you're going to be constantly weeding it out of an area you're trying to maintain as native species, and right upstream you've got all these exotic.
Okay, well there's my spiel on Lester Park.
How about if everybody else kind of strolls on down to Elms Park?
Oh yeah, we were going to walk in the yard.
If you were to stand here just a month ago, Pattee Creek was just a straight line from here right to that stop sign, and our whole design...
Yeah, basically just like that.
Right. So our whole design scheme was to not only add these meanders, but to create on the outside bends, it's a little deeper where there's a more of a pool type environment, and then it shallows up again and forms a ripple, and then it forms a little deeper environment over there on the edges.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's not.
Now the water is higher than when you guys were doing this, because none of those willow stakes were in running water, I don't think, before.
It does seem to be a little higher, which I can't account for. One thing you'll notice immediately is that there's fabric all the way along the lower 2/3 of this. There's no fabric up here. It's because we ran out of turf right at that spot, and we started having to get real inventive, and luckily one of the guys with us had a bunch of this fabric, and so we basically created the banks from there on down, which were, the turf was what was right here, but it's, you can just look at it and see it's a very poor quality. It's made up of this Kentucky bluegrass that's been pretty severely thrashed. So
Are you going to construct
A few of those as benches.
there will be there'll be a couple signs. It won't be much of a kiosk. There'll be a sign right here, and another one down at Lester Park, and maybe one up at that end as well, if we have enough money for it.
So where did you get most of the money for this project? Or where did it come from?
Most of it came from two sources. National Forest Foundation gave me about $4,000, and Montana's Future Fisheries program gave me about $5,000. And I've put in, I don't know, I'd guess around $4,000 or $5,000 of my own time into it that I never will get rewarded for. And then quite generously, everybody that's worked on it has given in-kind donations, including Tom and his firm. Tom was basically on his knees right over there, helping to build those burlaps, or those cloth sacks that created the banks.
made the Missoulian too.
So again, what you see here is a lot more heavy plantings of different shrubs along the way here. Also a lot of willow stakes, and there's also willow fascines, as they're called. They're bundled up stretches of willow at the base of these banks, so that hopefully even by July or August we'll see a lot more growth along here. And then it's all been seeded with grass seed as well. So hopefully this will all grow up rather quickly. And we can walk down and look at some of the other structures. So this is a good example of the pool environment that we created. You get a little shallow spot like this, and on the outside then you get more of a pool structure, and then it hells up again. It's deeper right down here only because the yellow flag iris once again chokes the channel and acts as sort of a dam, and basically defeats the design of this project. But we could only do so much with the money that we had, so we had to stop right there.
Or maybe you want to keep them. Maybe that's a good thing.
From a fish's point of view, it's probably a very good thing.
There you go.
Do you know where this creek went in this area? I mean, were you able to follow some of the
Well, it was
natural...
before it was just, straight.
Well, right. But before...
That's all it ever was.
Oh.
Because this was never the natural channel for this stream. It's still kind of up in the air where Pattee Creek flowed, say, 100 years ago. We do know that in the 1930s it was to the north of us here somewhere, and that it was used for irrigation, diversion, things like that. Then it was only shoved over here when these neighborhoods were built up, and they had to find a place to basically stick it. And this is where it got stuck, was along the street.
It was a nuisance instead of an amenity.
Right. In a way, it doesn't look like much because it's just this little tiny stretch, and it's like, well, gee, this is it. But I can tell you firsthand, this took a huge amount of work to get even this part done.
I remember how straight it was. I mean, it was like an arrow shot.
Yeah. Well, people always called it the ditch. It's like, okay, the name of the street is Pattee Creek Street. It's not a ditch.
Not a ditch.
Well, and now we've got
living organisms.
People actually expressing an interest in wanting to do this restoration work throughout this whole series of 4 or 5 blocks, which is really tremendous because it shows that there's a desire among community residents to actually take advantage of the fact that you have a stream in your backyard or whatever, as opposed to it being something to do away with.
It was neat seeing the people, I think in that house right there, came out in their pajamas one morning asking if we could do it in their house.
Really? Good. That's commitment. And once this matures a little bit, they're going to really want it. There'll be birds, and birds will be using it more.
My thinking all along is this is going to be kind of a demonstration area for the neighborhood, that as I see this grow in and
highly
become
visible,
more developed, that this will be a real showcase of what could be done. And obviously we don't have the same channel width to play with in some of these home fronts, but that doesn't mean that we can't still put some drop structures in, things like that, that'll substantially enhance what's there.
And then when you get all of them dealing with the grit chamber up there.
Yeah, we'll have to put our heads together on that one, John.
So if you live in Missoula, come by here once in a while in the next couple of years and see how it develops and grows.
Yep.
It's great too because it's an adjunct to Lewis and Clark Elementary.
And I was going to mention
a living classroom.
Yeah, when I was involved with that, so have this augment that is really
good.
Friday of the week that we built this whole thing, I was out here by myself doing some last-minute cleanup, and the whole 3rd grade class from Lewis and Clark School came down here to see what the heck was going on. They were all lined up all along here, and here I was trying to explain, well, this is now a natural trout stream. And, well, where's the fish? They'll be here, I think. I hope.
Come back when you're at Washington. Or
somewhere over there is probably still my footprint because I tried to cross the stream and ended up to my knee in muck. All the little kids watching me trying to tell them, well, don't do this.
Yeah. Well, real battle, of course, John, we were just talking earlier, it's going to try to keep the engineering from coming out and rip-wrapping this, because they're going to say, oh, the curb's going to fail, you know, we get all paranoid about that.
This is basically a whole new substrate from what was here before. I mean, we started with dirt and built it up.
Raw dirt.
Oh, I think we're going to have to mosey here.
Okay, let's move on.
For the back people to see. Oh my goodness. Slowly.
There you go, yeah.
Unbelievable.
And that's been there since the 1960s.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go by it again.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I won't be able to do much restoration work with this stretch.
I always think, you know, at the second coming, I want Jesus to come right there to that church and say, look at this, guys. This is unacceptable.
And then this is Pattee Creek as well.
Okay, here's the famous Bancroft Pond.
This is a pond wetland complex.
Okay.
That was actually, the story I heard is that it was a small gravel pit back in the 1950s.
Okay.
And it filled up with water and they made it into a fishing pond for kids. Okay. And it's now become one of Missoula's few remaining piece of wildlands.
It filled in with the silt and sand that washed down from Pattee Creek. There's a lot, you know, all the disturbance up there brought all that silt and sand down and filled this gravel pit in. And you can see secondary succession going on.
Right.
I've never been over there. Oh, there's supposedly there's a goose nesting up on that nesting platform.
Bancroft Pond?
Uh-huh.
But this, when I first came here 20 years ago, the cattails were just little patches here and there on the edges. They weren't out, you know, weren't out nearly as far. And it was, reasonably deep out in the middle. It's about knee deep in the very middle of this now. And one of the problems is people come here and feed the ducks. And so we get big congregations of ducks.
And ignore the sign.
Are we getting out?
Yeah.
This is where Pattee Creek winds up, basically, before it enters into the sewer system. Right at the end of this little complex, for the next street, is the last time that Pattee Creek is above ground. It flows through an underground culvert between some apartments and storage buildings and goes into the pipe at Russell, and from there on we'll see where it used to be.
So is this natural then?
No, this is a gravel pit, I think.
Most people do not realize that it's a city park. It's officially known as Children's Fish Pond Park. And Doug Waters, who used to be a park employee for a number of years, remembers growing up and coming over there and fishing in the 50s as a kid. And then over time, people started storing their boats and their lumber piles and everything else along the back fence, and the Parks Department finally gotten rid of those. And
Well, they talk about dredging it out ever so often.
Right.
Create some deep pools again.
The yellow flag iris. It's gotten quite profuse down along the edges already.
it's a real trade-off with something like, you know, to have some city wildlife, to have a place where kids can come and see ducks is really, really nice. But if only they could convince people to just look at the ducks and not feed them, then we wouldn't get such a congregation.
We now have 3 signs here, 2 little beat up ones, and the ones on the kiosk there that talk about that. But you just saw a family leave from feeding the ducks.
Oh, I've seen people pull up with, you know,
oh yeah, I mean,
come out
right in
and
front of the
just
sign.
dump a whole bunch of bread and leave, so they're not even coming to watch the ducks.
No,
you know,
it's a problem. It really is.
One of the things that the neighbors on Pattee Creek Street are trying to do is get the, well, we've tried to work with the city to calm the traffic down there. Straight shot, because the creek, there's no, and the city has agreed to.
Do you want to show the...
Hop in and there's a place that people seldom see.
Do you want to show the last place where it's above ground before it enters? Okay.
We'll drive by it.
All right.
It's really pretty.
Let's see, yellow flag iris.
Look at these ducks diving. Really. Just totally dive out of sight and then come back up again. There was a big controversy about this area right here because the city was putting fill, was just storing fill here, and there were all these Colombian growth squirrels, I think. They were just burying them alive, and people got pretty upset about the city about that.
What were they burying alive?
Colombian ground squirrels.
On that breeder point, the whole thing about Colombian ground squirrels.
Oh my gosh. Well, they're still here. The ground squirrels probably just dug right through within a matter of hours of whatever fill there was. But
the creek used to cross the road here.
This is the last spot of Pattee Creek right here.
There it is going into,
how far are we from the river
that's
here?
the structure that takes it now over to 39th Street.
Right.
Is that right? That structure right there takes it to 39th Street.
And it actually
It used
goes...
to go right in between this apartment house and this building right here. It used to go right through there, but it was filled in and grassed over, but that's where it went. The creek went right through there. Admittedly, not a very good place for a creek to... What I would have done if I were the city is I would have brought the creek down here and taken it through the whole back of Playfair Park and just keep looking for places like that to take it.
Right.
Better than it not running at all.
Okay, so I'm going to let you start navigating.
Okay.
Okay, is it possible to...
You can drive.
Bellevue doesn't go through, is that right?
No, but you can drive to the whole... from where all the different looking sod is. It has kind of this neat little serpentine shape.
That's what it used to look like.
Oh, that's what it is. I suppose we could hop out here a moment since this is a fairly horrifying sight.
Okay, I'm now standing in the middle of Pattee Creek. This is where it used to flow. And you can see 3 years ago.
Yeah. But it was in a pipe that popped out here or something?
Right through there.
Open channel. See that, all that hardware over there. There used to be a big box there that dropped in, cut across the street at a funny angle. You see the top of the retaining wall across the street here, right next to that street light? It was open from the street to that point. It was open from here all the way through this big serpentine curve area, and then dropped into a concrete channel behind the other apartments. And it continued all the way to Paxson.
An open channel.
An open channel.
But now it's all pipe.
Well, no, it's just buried, and the pipe goes out to 39th.
The pipe runs down Russell to 39th Street. So
there's no water, and which is really frustrating because this was a great spot. My daughter used to play with a friend of hers that lived right here, and there was a muskrat that lived in here, and there was ducks. It was a great spot. I never heard any problems from anybody about any drownings or any accidents or anything that happened. But they were absolutely determined to obliterate it. They did.
when we daylight the rest of Pattee Creek, we're going to dig all this up again and return it all. In fact, that's Ken just told me something that gave me heartburn, which is he's about to bury what we're going to dig up again in a few years' time.
Well, I was just telling John, there's a project the Parks pretty much has to follow through on to take care of the open channel that's now dewatered all the way from 34th Street to Paxton. And the cottonwoods and aspen along there are probably going to die because they don't have any water source. And it's an open piece of parkland that they have some liability exposure for now that there's water in the ditch. So.
But why wouldn't they want it flowing through a park?
Well, they would love to, but they have no control over that. See, the engineers already made the decision to pipe it all the way to 39. Dave Clayton and I had this very frustrating discussion about why did they do this.
Yeah, this is where Pattee Creek used to be, and you can see.
It was this wonderful serpentine, open channel. It was just great. And there was a family of muskrats who lived in that pipe right over there. They'd reappear every now and then.
It's a concept called shifting baselines, where you change people's expectations. If you never knew it was here, then you don't know what you lost. And as biological systems degrade, well, some people's idea of what it used to be like is what it was like in their lifetime. And they really don't know that before that it was drastically different. So, when I drive out Reserve Street, past all those big box stores, and I remember when it was all pastures out there.
And it was cleared up for by the residents.
And to other people, it's always been like that.
Kind of. I'm not sure. We'd have to go on the other side and look at it because that's how the picture was taken.
I see.
They took out everything. This is being on the other side looking back at it. And they just took out. And this was October 2003 when they did this. So it's really sad. And like when Vicki found out that, before anybody found out about it, it was too late. So they tried to ask her, when did you put the public notice in the paper? And one of the professors who lives along Pattee Creek didn't even notice any notice or anything. So there wasn't enough time to mount any protest about it. So. I know.
That's pretty incredible. God, I can't believe I didn't do anything about it.
And nobody.
Well, that was quite a public process.
So it's kind of like.
It's not very public involvement oriented.
Kind of like subtly.
The idea was that they held a meeting and it wasn't secret or anything.
Yeah, but they didn't advertise it either.
Yeah. Okay. So look, this was all totally sugar house,
Yeah.
all lined with willows.
So in this picture, this brown house is that brown house, and this is what it looked like, and that's what's left.
So I guess you can't get through here.
I think you have to go back and go into the next street.
Yeah, go on over. And the irony is
I can see. Look, there's a channel that it went through. A concrete
there.
line channel it went through right there.
Well, the irony is the reason you can't get through is because of Pattee Creek.
Be highly effective in, right?
Oh yeah.
But it's not nearly water.
Right.
And that's what we're going to do at Bellevue. Is that it
Spotters, I'm relying on you to yell at me. If I'm doing something I shouldn't. Did we lose the woman with the little baby?
Yeah, it wasn't even that long.
It wasn't even that long ago, was it?
October 2003.
Yeah, the people who move here now will never know that that little creek went right through there. And of course, the city keeps telling me, that's not its natural channel. That was moved long ago. So what's the big deal?
See that filled in?
Yeah, the filled in. Okay, so it came across, and there's its channel again. And now this.
And what Ken was just saying is that Parks plans to bury all that, to fill all that up.
Because the water's been diverted. It's all along over here.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. At Bancroft.
And all these water birds and stuff growing.
See, look at all the places where it could have been allowed to meander through all these parks. Disgusting. How nice. But the guy at the engineer said people would rather have soccer fields and playing fields than a creek and a bunch of vegetation that you can't really do anything with.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I was, last time I came down here, I ran into Don Martin, who's a computer science professor at the university who lives right down in here. This here continues on down. There's another very nice little park right there. It continues on down
without water,
that way for another, quite a few blocks length. And you can, it's a nice walk. It's a nice place to bike or walk right down there, but we can't really follow it in the car. But I encountered another university professor who considers himself, that I read the newspaper every day, and he thought he walks his dog here every day, and so he feels very attached to that area. And last time I was down here, I ran into him and started talking to him, and
you can't
he said,
cut through here.
I wondered why the creek had dried up. I wondered what happened to it. I know I never heard anything about it. I certainly wasn't notified individually and asked. The story I heard was that there were the 8 property owners who were going to be assessed much of the cost of the project were notified, and they had, and a majority of them, well, it's like this, a majority of them had to object to it or the city would do it, and that some of them lived out of state, and their notification letters came back returned to sender, addressed incorrect or something like that, and that was taken as a yes, okay. They never even received the notification. So we're gonna head back to the university now. Enough depression.
Yeah.
Gonna be depressed on Grant Creek now.
Yeah.
Although there's some good news on Grant Creek too. Let's see if I can figure out where the heck I am.
And if we can take the next step of increasing that restoration to that whole series of blocks, then we've basically made a statement that we want Pattee Creek to be something that's no longer a nuisance. Well, having talked quite a bit with homeowners in that area, I'm convinced now that a big part of what happened to Pattee Creek was just, as Missoula grew up over time, people's main concern was, their yard, their house, things like that, the street system, and Pattee Creek just became less and less of an issue for them, unless it was an issue that reduced the value of their property. So, in a way, you just saw an accumulated lack of care over time that resulted by the turn of the century, into Pattee Creek being almost, secondhand news, like nobody even cared what the heck happened to it.
Incremental degradation. This is what we call that. The development of South Hills, is my guess, is most of what killed Pattee Creek, because it went from, much of the moisture, except moisture that ran off when the ground was frozen, except for that period of spring thaw when the creek would really flow, much of it would percolate in and then maintain a base flow in the creek. With the paving of the South Hills, and I think more water would tend to come off in these kind of flood-like events. Although I was told that it was not really flooding at any other time except associated with ice damming. That was the main reason.
Well, the big answer down the road is to create a public push to return Pattee Creek to the city instead of going the other direction. I mean, if you think about it, what happened to Pattee Creek is the end result of 150 years of development of a city right in the middle of a creek.